Let's go back to the New York Times report. Joining us now to talk about that is Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff. He is the chair of the House Intelligence Committee. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for being with us and helping us understand what could be a turning point, a split between the Mueller investigators and the Attorney General's office. Let me read you part of this story. The special counsel's investigators had already written multiple summaries of the report, their own summaries, and some team members believe that Barr should have included more of their material in the 4-page letter he wrote on March 24th, laying out their main conclusions. How do you see that?
Well, we don't know yet whether this represents the majority view of the Mueller team, but nonetheless, it's very concerning. You would expect that in a report that's 400 pages long, that there would be a summary or summaries of the findings. And it is, I think, significant, if that's the case, that the Attorney General arrogated unto himself to write his own summary rather than using the ones that the Mueller team may very well have expected to be made public. Those summaries may be among the most carefully drafted, worded parts of the entire report by the Mueller team. They know that most Americans aren't going to read all 400 pages. They're going to look to those top lines. And so they were probably wordsmithed very carefully, which means that any deviation by Barr to give perhaps an overly optimistic picture of the president's behavior, particularly as to obstruction, would have concerned the members of that team.
Let's put up P104 in the control room if we can, because the New York Times does address this issue. The Justice Department quickly determined that the summaries contain sensitive information, these summaries prepared by the Mueller team, like classified materials, secret grand jury testimony, and information related to current federal investigations that must remain confidential, according to 2 government officials. So that would be the response about why they didn't use the Mueller summaries, because there was stuff in there that they didn't feel was ready yet for public consumption. Is that adequate to you?
No, it isn't adequate at all, because if that was the case, first of all, I would imagine the Mueller team would have all of that in mind in drafting the summaries. And as it pertains to classified information, they might have included that in a separate annex. So that doesn't explain it at all, and in particular doesn't explain why Barr felt he had to draft his own summary rather than seeking court permission to release grand jury material and providing the Mueller findings when they were ready, instead of trying to color the public's perception. And now we're 2 weeks into this. All we have is Bill Barr's word for this. And of course, that comes from someone who was picked for his hostility to the obstruction case, which appears to be what some of the Mueller team is taking issue with.
Look, there's one thing that obviously could clear this up, which is the release of the report, which is something the American people in every poll have said they are eager to see. Mr. Chairman, I do want to ask, though, about...
Yes, and John, on that point,
okay,
you're absolutely right. There's little, as you can see, that unites the American people about the Russia investigation, but everyone is united on the need to make this report public, and this underscores why.
But completely public, 100% public? Do you feel that every person in America has the right to see all the grand jury material, all material that might be classified, all the material that has to do with ongoing investigations?
I think that the Attorney General should have done what he pledged to do in his Senate confirmation, which is be as transparent as law and policy allows, and that would mean going to the court to seek the court's permission to, yes, release the grand jury material. There may need to be small redactions if there's a classified annex that can be shared with Congress in a closed session. But these broad categories that the Attorney General is trying to redact are unnecessary redactions, and it looks like he is trying to hide information rather than be forthcoming as he promised.
All I'll say is, again, we don't know if they're necessary or unnecessary because we haven't seen them. We haven't seen it yet. That, again, is the one thing that can clear it out. You say that some could be given to Congress in some kind of annex that would be top secret. There are critics who say nothing stays top secret in Congress, that if it went to Congress, ultimately it would leak. How could you promise that it would never get out to the public?
Well, look, we deal with classified information all the time. That's what's provided to the intelligence committees. And the Attorney General can't take the position that now I'm not going to share any classified information with Congress because it might leak. All too often the leaks, in fact, come from the administration, not the Congress. But more than that, John, there's a statutory obligation to share counterintelligence information with the Congress. That's not discretionary on the part of the Justice Department. They're going to need to share that information.
The framing of the article, first in the New York Times and then the Washington Post, is that there's concern within the Mueller team about how the narrative is being framed here. Should that be the concern, really, of investigators here, how a narrative is being framed? Shouldn't they just be concerned about the facts?
Well, I think they are concerned that the facts may be misrepresented or that they may be slanted by this bar summary. And I think they have every right to be concerned about that. They put 2 years of hard work into this. I think they did a real service to the country. And to see that work product in any way mischaracterized, if that's their feeling, yes, they should be concerned about it. And again, it all comes back to the fact we need transparency. Let the American people judge whether what Mr. Barr did was fair or unfair. And the only way that can happen is if they make this report public.
There's one way to clear this up, and that's to see the report. And I think many of us need to suspend our criticism of what's in it or not until we see how much is in there. Maybe it's soon. Maybe it's in the next few days. Mr. Chairman, your committee is very busy. You want to see inauguration information from the Trump Inaugural Committee.
Well, we're concerned about foreign influence and whether any of the resources that went into that massive fundraising came from foreign parties interested in influencing this new administration. We already know, because there's been a conviction of Sam Patton, that there was at least a straw purchase involving $50,000 to buy tickets for the inauguration on behalf of a Russian and Ukrainian. Whether that was the sum total of foreign investment or there's more, we would like to find out. And apparently we're not alone. There are prosecutorial authorities in New York reported to be looking at the same thing.
On the tax returns, Americans have wanted to see the president's tax returns for some time. The polls also show that. By law, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee can ask for them, and Richie Neal from Massachusetts has asked for them. I'm sure you would like to see them, but do you feel that you have a right to see them legally, or will they stay just within the Ways and Means Committee?
Well, I defer to Chairman Neal. I think he has made a very narrowly tailored request, and this is not going to be discretionary on the IRS part. They shall provide them to Chairman Neal, and I think the chairman is on very rock-solid ground here. What happens after that, if the chairman determines that other committees need to review them, I'm sure he will take whatever the appropriate process is, but I defer to the chairman on that. I think he has set out quite clearly the interest of the Ways and Means Committee under its tax oversight responsibilities to obtain those returns, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I do expect the administration is going to fight it. Indeed, they're fighting every request by every committee, but I think they're going to lose, and the law is very clearly on the chairman's side.
Well, they will fight it. Whether or not they lose, one thing is possible. It could go on for a long time, months, if not years. Finally, I know you are concerned about the incident in Mar-A-Lago where a woman with 2 Chinese passports, 4 cell phones, malware, and a thumb drive got in. From an intelligence perspective, the Intelligence Committee, what is your concern?
Well, I think people need to realize that apart from the White House itself, that resort, Mar-A-Lago, where the president spends so much of his time, has got to be the top intelligence target for foreign intelligence services around the world. They are deeply focused on that. And so when we saw early in the presidency the president looking at documents by cell phone light, we all asked, what kind of documents are they? And is that cell phone that he's using secure? And now we have this report of someone going to this property with multiple electronics devices with a thumb drive containing malware. Now, we don't know anything about that malware, and I have to say that this, if she was a part of any kind of an operation, it looks very amateurish. I'm more concerned about something more sophisticated. You can buy your way into Mar-A-Lago, which means that those that are interested in gathering intelligence there don't have to try to go under the ruse of being a guest going to the swimming pool or some non-existent conference. They'll be more sophisticated than that. They'll buy a membership and they'll use that access to do whatever they feel they can get away with in terms of gathering information. That ought to concern all Americans.
Chairman Adam Schiff, thank you so much for being with us.